spooky, haunted. Right there. This picture. Come on now.
Welcome back once again to Spooky Bricks. Today we're going to be taking an in-depth look at my mock of the Joshua Ward house from Salem, Massachusetts. The house was built in 1784 by a merchant named Joshua Ward. It was one of the earliest houses in Salem to be built in the brick federal style, which became very popular as there are many other similar looking houses in Salem. However, arguably the most interesting history about the property doesn't involve the house itself, but instead the grounds that it was built on. It's the former site of the home of George Corwin, who was the sheriff during the witch trials. He was also the nephew of Judge Jonathan Corwin, who lived in the witch house, which we covered in a previous video. Corwin was tasked with getting the pleas from the accused witches, and even had a jail cell in the basement of his home where he would interrogate and perhaps even torture them to get the confessions he wanted. After his death, Corwin's body was also kept in the basement of the home as his family was afraid that angry locals who had loved ones killed in the witch trials would desecrate and vandalize his grave. And it's no doubt that this troubled history helped lead to the Joshua Ward's house reputation as the most haunted house in Salem. There have been many stories over the years of various ghostly encounters, and in 1981 this haunting picture was taken inside the house. At the time, the house served as a real estate office, and when someone tried taking a Polaroid picture of one of the employees, Julie Tremblay, this strange image came out instead. Now some say it's an apparition of one of the accused witches, but others say it's just Tremblay herself shaking her head and creating some weird exposure issues within the camera. But regardless of what you believe, the house exists today as a hotel called The Merchant, where you can stay and perhaps have your very own ghostly encounter. The very first thing I did was to create a template for the overall shape of the house. This won't be part of the final build and just helps me to figure out the size of the base. The base itself is made up of dark tan and olive green plates, which give it a nice autumn grass look. So as you can see here, I had the tree trunk partially built, but I ended up taking that apart and completely redoing it, but I'll talk about that a little more later. Out front there are decorative pillars on either side of the entrance, and I recreated them with 1x4 tiles on snot bricks. And then I put a 2x2 jumper plate on top of those, and I topped it all off with a Technic ball joint. Past those, we have a brick pathway that leads up to some steps and a dark bluish door. The door is surrounded by columns made of 2x2 rounded textured bricks and a whole lot of other ornate detailing. On top of the door area, there's a slightly curved roof. I achieved the curve by using a flexible rigid bar piece. On that, I attached a mechanical claw piece with some hollow round 1x1 plates on the other end, and finally I connected a 1x3 tile to the round 1x1s. And then I just repeated all of that until I got a nice curved roof. The foundation of the Joshua Ward house is made up of some large stone blocks, which of course is very easy to translate into Lego. I used light bluish gray and dark tan for the foundation and the steps, which give off a nice stone concrete color combination. For the bricks on the house itself, I used pieces in reddish brown and dark red. As I've mentioned in previous videos, these colors work perfectly for that brownstone brick look, and are close enough so that they blend together, but also different enough to create some nice subtle color texturing. The walls are mostly made up of 2x2 plates, but I added in pieces like masonry bricks, ingot pieces, and 1x1 and 1x2 rounded plates to give it some extra texture. I also sprinkled in a few tile pieces as well. They have a little bit of a lip on the bottom. It's not very noticeable, but it does help to vary up the texture a little bit. I essentially just used the same techniques that I've been using on chimneys and just applied it to an entire building. On the corner, we have some ivy crawling up the building. I used several 4x3 plant pieces in olive green as the base for the ivy, and then I just plugged in various leafy pieces on top of those. I also used a few olive green snake pieces. Now these pieces have some printing on the top, so I just turned them over and used the underside. And I think they look really nice and works well as some twisting ivy vines. Now, when looking up reference pictures for this MOC, almost every picture I found showed the building with this ivy in various states of growth. But when I went to Salem this past August to set up my display, I wanted to check out the building for some in-person reference, and there was no more ivy. At this point, I had already finished most of the building, and I did briefly consider removing the ivy from my MOC to make it more accurate, but of course I decided against that. For one thing, the ivy could just grow back, but more importantly, the MOC looks better with it. The ivy gives it some extra personality. The building obviously has a whole lot of windows, which are just 4 of the 1x2x2 window pieces in white, with some plates with door rails to give it some extra dimensionality. Many of the windows have some arched brickwork over them. I mimicked this look by loosely putting together several of the 1x2 plates that are attached at the bottom but not at the top, giving it a slight curve. I then slid that assembly between 2 sloped bricks and finished it all off with a long section of 1x plates and tiles connected with some snot bricks. And I think that recreates the look of the windows pretty well. In the back, there's a little section with another door that sticks out from the main structure. Now, while I had no problem finding many photos of the front of the building, finding good photos of the back of the building was another story altogether. I was working with very small, low-quality photos and images taken by people staying at the hotel that just showed little glimpses of the back area. So I had to use a little creativity to sort of fill in the blank spots. When I visited Salem in August, I did walk to the back of the building to finally get a good look at it, and I think I got pretty close. One of the things I could see from the reference photos was the pattern of the decking on the balcony area, which I was able to recreate with 1x2 grill pieces. Another thing I got a good look at was the railing around the balcony area. I made that with some white telescope pieces and windows with some opaque white glass pieces. Now, most of the roofs I make are made with large sections of plates finished off with tiles that just sit on top of sloped bricks to get the necessary angle. I always avoid using slope bricks for the roof itself because when you do, you get this really unappealing jagged edge, and when you're trying to make realistic looking buildings, it's just not ideal. However, the roof on this building was a little different than what I was used to. Commonly, the roofs I make are only angled on two sides, making it very easy to just have two large sections of plates coming together at a point. But the roof on the Joshua Ward house is angled on all four sides, and trying to make it work with four large sections of plates just seemed too unrealistic. There would be too many angles that would have to butt up against each other flush to make it work. Also, because it's angled on all four sides, you wouldn't see any of those ugly jagged edges that I mentioned earlier, so it just made more sense to build the roof in the more traditional way with sloped bricks. And because of that, it ended up being much stronger than my typical roof assemblies, as the whole thing could just be built as one solid chunk that's very easy to lift on and off. Although the one drawback to the slopes is that I can't add leaves to the roof like I could with the roofs made of plates and tiles. At the peak of the roof, there's a little fenced off area, and I built this railing with the same techniques I used for the railing around the balcony. And then of course the chimneys are built with the same color and texture techniques that I used for the rest of the house. Now let's get back to the tree. As I said earlier, I redid the tree from the version you saw before and built the new tree around a long Technic axle slid up through the base. Around the Technic axle, I slid down 2x2 rounded textured bricks to give it some nice bark texturing. And then around that, I put some tubes and hoses for some more organic texturing. And then I wrapped the whole thing in some light bluish gray strings for, you guessed it, more texturing. Now, unlike in my other videos, I'm not going to say that this is the best tree I ever made, but I am very happy with it and I do think it turned out really nice. And of course, I added some lights. As on my previous Salem MOCs, I covered the windows with tissue paper, which helps to diffuse the light and hide the emptiness of the house. Now, it may just be because it's the holiday season, but with the lights on, it sort of gives me Home Alone house vibes. What do you think? So that'll be it for this video, which will also be my final mock review video for the year. And this year was very Salem heavy. I didn't intend it to be that way, but I was offered that opportunity in Salem with the display and the museum, and that's just how it worked out. But next year I plan to move on to a brand new spooky town with its own unique haunted history and architecture, which I'm very excited for. And maybe I'll even do some famous movie spooky houses, who knows? But until then, stay tuned for more spooky builds.